Imagine walking through the back streets of London in 1858. The dark waters of the River Thames flow beside you, while the air is so foul that even breathing feels difficult. The smell is so overwhelming that the British Parliament is forced to suspend its sessions. Members of Parliament cover their faces with handkerchiefs, and curtains soaked in chemicals are hung over the windows in a desperate attempt to block the stench. But it's useless. The smell has seeped into everything. This was the event that went down in history as the Great Stink. And the most interesting part is this. The entire crisis was caused by what seemed like one very simple question. Where was human waste supposed to go? Now think about the world we live in today. Imagine a world without toilets, no flushing, no sewer systems, no plumbing, no hygiene, no privacy, and no proper sanitation. People struggle just to deal with one of the most basic parts of everyday life. Yet the toilet, something we barely think about today, is actually one of the most important inventions in human history. It may well be the silent hero that has saved millions of lives. And here's the surprising part. Its story goes back much farther than most people realize. Today, we're going to explore humanity's thousands of years-long battle against filth, disease, and foul smells, along with the little-known history of one of the most important inventions we've ever created. So, let's begin. For most of human history, people simply didn't have a dedicated toilet. Whenever nature called, they used whatever place was available. A back alley, a riverbank, a ditch, an empty field, even beneath a bridge. Wherever seemed convenient became the toilet. Things became even more interesting during medieval Europe. People often emptied their chamber pot straight out of the window without giving it a second thought. Sometimes they would at least warn the people below by shouting, "Gardez-loo," which roughly meant, "Watch out, it's coming down." Some historians even believe that's where the English word loo comes from. Just imagine that for a second. Walking through the streets wasn't just about avoiding the horrible smell. You also had to keep an eye on whatever might come flying down from the windows above. Back then, foul smells were simply part of everyday life. Disease was everywhere. Yet no one had figured out the real connection between the two. And that's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Most people assume the toilet is a modern invention, but the truth is exactly the opposite. The history of the toilet stretches back thousands of years. Around 3000 BC, roughly 5,000 years ago, the people of Skara in Scotland accomplished something remarkable. They built homes out of stone. More importantly, those homes contained small drainage channels built into the walls. In other words, even during the Stone Age, they had developed a primitive form of indoor plumbing, and that's genuinely astonishing. About 500 years later, another civilization pushed the idea even further. This time, it was the Indus Valley civilization. In the city of Mohenjo-Daro, located in present-day Pakistan, nearly every house had its own toilet. Even more impressive, those toilets were connected to an advanced, city-wide drainage system. Covered sewers ran beneath the streets, linking the entire city together. And all of this existed around 2500 BC. The most incredible part, Europe wouldn't reach a similar level of sanitation for another 4,000 years. Meanwhile, on the island of Crete, the Minoans took another major step forward. Around 1700 BC, they developed one of history's earliest flushing toilets. Water stored in reservoirs flowed through clay pipes, carrying waste away. Then came the Romans, and they took sanitation to an entirely different level. they built enormous public latrines, long stone benches, rows of holes, but no partitions, no privacy. People sat shoulder to shoulder with complete strangers. They talked, they socialized, they even conducted business there. For the Romans, the public toilet wasn't just a place to relieve yourself, it was also a social gathering place. But what about toilet paper? It didn't exist. Instead, they used something called a tersorium. It was a sea sponge attached to the end of a stick. Before using it, the sponge was dipped into vinegar or salt water for cleaning. And here's the part that's hard to believe. In many public latrines, that same sponge was shared by everyone. Just think about that for a moment, a room full of strangers and one sponge, shared by all of them. Yet during all of this, the Romans still considered themselves the most advanced civilization on Earth. But no civilization lasts forever. When the Roman Empire collapsed, much of its sewer system disappeared along with it. And for the next 1,000 years, Europe forgot almost everything the Romans had learned about sanitation. Castles had what were known as garderobes. They were simple stone toilets built into the walls. You would sit on a stone seat and the waste would fall straight down the outside of the castle. Sometimes into the moat, sometimes simply onto the ground below. Things were even worse in the cities. The streets of London had essentially become open sewers, and the River Thames had turned into a dumping ground for just about everything. Butcher waste, chemicals from tanneries, and of course, human sewage. The worst part? People were drawing their drinking water from the very same river they were dumping their waste into, and no one could understand why people kept getting sick. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid. Today, we recognize these as devastating diseases, but there was nothing mysterious about them. They all had one thing in common: contaminated water. More specifically, water polluted with human waste. The problem was that people didn't realize that for centuries. Instead, they believed diseases spread through foul-smelling air. This belief became known as the miasma theory. The logic seemed simple enough. If it smells bad, it must be causing disease. So people carried flowers wherever they went. They burned incense inside their homes. They tried everything they could to cover up the smell. Everything. Except fixing the real problem. Because the real danger wasn't in the air. It was in the water. And here's where the story takes another unexpected turn. The first true flushing toilet wasn't invented by a plumber. It was invented by a poet. In 1596, Sir John Harington, a writer and the godson of Queen Elizabeth I, designed a device he called the Ajax. The system had a raised water cistern, a hand-operated valve, and it used about 7.5 gallons of water to flush waste into a cesspool below. Harington first installed one at his own estate. Later, when Queen Elizabeth came to visit, he built one for her as well. According to most historical accounts, she actually used it. Sounds like a huge success, doesn't it? Well, not exactly. The invention never caught on. It was expensive, it was noisy, and Harington had made plenty of enemies at court because of his sharp, satirical writing. As a result, most people dismissed his invention as little more than a joke. So, yes, the flushing toilet was invented in 1596, but then it was almost completely forgotten. For nearly 200 years passed. By the 1850s, London's population had grown to almost 3 million people. But here's the shocking part. A city that large still had almost no proper sewer system, and just about everything, yes, literally everything, ended up flowing straight into the River Thames. By then, the river was no longer just a river. Its water had turned almost black. It was thick, polluted, and filled with filth. Then came the summer of 1858. London was hit by one of the hottest summers in years. As the temperatures climbed, the smell rising from the Thames became absolutely unbearable. It got so bad that the British Parliament could no longer carry on with its work. Members of Parliament hung curtains soaked in chloride of lime over the windows, hoping to block out the stench. Meetings were cut short. People began leaving the building. This was the event that became known as the Great Stink. And at that point, the government could no longer ignore the problem. Something had to change. The job was handed to an engineer named Joseph Bazalgette. His mission was simple: design a modern sewer system for London. Bazalgette came up with a massive engineering project, more than 1,100 miles of street sewers, connected to 82 miles of main intercepting sewers that carried waste away from the city. The project took years to complete. It cost millions of pounds, but in the end, it was worth every penny. Because it didn't just get rid of London's terrible smell, it changed the city's future. London went from being one of the deadliest cities in the world to becoming one of the most livable. But interestingly enough, even with the sewer system finally solved, the toilet itself still needed one more important breakthrough. By the way, if you've made it this far, chances are you're the kind of person who enjoys discovering the hidden stories behind the ordinary things we use every day. If that's you, don't forget to subscribe, because there are plenty more fascinating stories hiding in plain sight. Anyway, let's get back to our story. And first, let's clear up one of history's biggest myths. Thomas Crapper did not invent the toilet. Yep, that's one of the most persistent misconceptions in history. Thomas Crapper's achievement wasn't inventing the toilet. His real contribution was helping make it popular. He was a successful plumber in Victorian London. He also owned a company that manufactured and sold toilets. Over the course of his career, he held 9 patents. One of them improved the bullcock mechanism, the device that controls the water level inside the toilet cistern. His company's name, T. Crapper and Company, was stamped onto toilets all across England. Years later, during the First World War, American soldiers stationed in England kept seeing that name everywhere they went. Before long, they started referring to the toilet as the crapper. Over time, the expression "take a crap" became associated with the name, and eventually, it stuck. But the real unsung hero of this story wasn't Thomas Crapper, it was Alexander Cumming. In 1775, more than 100 years before Thomas Crapper, Cumming patented one of the most important parts of the modern toilet, the S-shaped pipe beneath the toilet bowl. Today, we know it as the S-trap. At first glance, it doesn't look like anything special, just a curved pipe. But what it does is incredibly important. That simple bend always holds a small amount of water inside the pipe, and that water creates a seal, preventing foul-smelling sewer gases from travelling back up into your bathroom. So, if your bathroom doesn't smell like a sewer every time you walk in, you have Alexander Cumming to thank, and strangely enough, almost nobody knows his name. Over the centuries, toilets continued to evolve. Every new design became more efficient, more hygienic, and more practical than the one before it. Today, modern toilets are designed to do far more than simply dispose of waste. They're built to use less water, improve hygiene, and reduce their impact on the environment. some countries, toilets even come equipped with heated seats, built-in bidets, automatic flushing, and a wide range of smart features. But when you step back and look at the bigger picture, you realize this has never just been a story about plumbing. It's a story about public health. It's a story about what happens when basic sanitation is ignored. Because when sanitation fails, people pay for it with their lives. Today, we know that proper sanitation can reduce cases of cholera by nearly 70%. Not just medicine, not just vaccines. Sometimes, something as ordinary as a toilet makes all the difference. The toilet didn't just change the way we live, it changed who got to live. From the first stone drainage systems to today's smart toilets, the evolution of the toilet tells a much bigger story, a story of human ingenuity, innovation, and our endless pursuit of cleaner, healthier lives. What began as a simple necessity has become one of the foundations of modern sanitation and one of the quietest heroes in the history of public health. Because in the end, this isn't about comfort, it's about survival. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Hidden History. I hope this story surprised you as much as it surprised me. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what hidden history you'd like to explore next. Next week, we'll uncover the story behind another everyday invention that most people never think twice about: the hidden history of soap. Until then, take a closer look at the world around you, because sometimes the most ordinary things hide the most extraordinary stories. And remember, history is everywhere.